Welcome everyone, Costin here with Ultimate General Civil War, which has been out for a number of years and for which I've already done a number of playthroughs, but I keep coming back to this title because it is one of my favorite Total War style video games that's out there. Not that there's many Total War style video games, at least in terms of the battles. And in point of fact, I would argue that the battles in this game are quite a bit better in a lot of ways than the battles in Total War games themselves. Not necessarily in spectacle, but in terms of actual tactics and strategy, significantly better. Now, this is with a mod called J P Rebalance, which further improves on the battles. See, the battles in this game are already focused on not so much killing the enemy, but rather breaking their morale, routing them, capturing them, and the mod pushes that along even further, as well as redoing quite a few of the battles in the game as well. The campaign is very linear. It's not a sandbox, so it's not a Total War style campaign, but going to get you from one historical battle to another, along with some minor battles along the way, and some campaign-only battles for the very ending of the game, like Richmond or Washington, dependent on which side you're playing. Now, when you start a campaign, you have a bunch of choices. West Point graduation, all that kind of stuff. What should you choose over here? Well, for my part, I think the best choices involve getting reconnaissance and politics early on. You're always going to get to a point of army organization as a tactician, but whenever you can choose a great deal of reconnaissance, go for it. Because things like medicine, logistics, training, they're important, but they're not so important early on in a campaign when you have a far more limited number of troops. So it's better to focus on those kind of things. And then you get to pick a side, either Confederate or Union. Now, here's my view on this. If you're a new player to this, playing the Union is much easier than playing the Confederates. That's because this game is trying to be historically accurate, and suffice it to say, if you're not a complete idiot, you will be able to win a lot of battles far more easily as the Union than the Confederates, as the Union would have done historically if they weren't being led by a bunch of absolute imbeciles in charge of the military. Politically speaking, yeah, Lincoln was brilliant. But from a military standpoint, there were very few good Union generals, and most of them were out in the West as opposed to the East, where you had really one of the big theaters of operation with the largest armies for both sides, be it the Army of Northern Virginia or the Army of the Potomac. The Army of the Potomac was led by a bunch of incompetent generals or political generals. When you think of McClellan, McDowell, Burnside and his failure at Fredericksburg, or the Army of Virginia under Pope, or even Hooker, then yeah, things end up going really badly. What about Meade? I would dare argue, personally, that even Meade, for all his victories, and for his victory at Gettysburg, even General Meade was not exactly a top-tier general. Then you compare that to the Confederates. The Confederates, vastly outnumbered, outgunned, outclassed, with a far weaker economy, far fewer troops. To be quite blunt about it, the war could have been ended in the first year, certainly within the second year. But it dragged on for quite a bit longer than that because of the military incompetence on display. You can really thank McClellan for that in his Peninsular campaign, as well as his other campaigns where he screwed up again and again facing the Confederates. Now, the Confederates, if you're a veteran of Total War in particular, pose a far more interesting challenge. No sympathy whatsoever from a political standpoint, but from a military standpoint, you do have to consider that you are going to be outnumbered, outgunned, and you're going to have a serious fight on your hands. And yes, I am going to name my leader Jackson, because, yeah, Stonewall Jackson, one of the best generals of the entire war. And you do start each campaign with a bunch of... with a mission, a minor mission, which doesn't really matter. Now, I'm going to skip past this and just go past this particular mission right after the end of it. The first mission doesn't really matter, except that you want to maintain some of the troops there, not all of them, in top tier shape, because you're going to carry them over. And units in the campaign will carry over from battle to battle. And you get to customize units in terms of their commanding officers, in terms of their guns, in terms of their veterancy and the camp. Now, by default, you'll only have one division with up to 4 units, 4 brigades per division. Now, over here, I started with 2 infantry brigades and one artillery brigade, and I've added another infantry brigade for a total of 3 infantry brigades and 1 artillery brigade and 1 division. I've also spent all of my points career-wise, because you've got RPG points, career points. I've spent them in politics, outside of, you know, the customization choices. Like, early on in a campaign, politics are very important because politics dictate post-battle rewards. Now, what I really like about this game, as opposed to what we see in Total War games, if in a Total War game you lose a battle, you're very quickly going to lose the campaign. And it can be an individual battle at the start of it. Here, you can actually lose a lot of battles and still win the campaign, or at least fight them to a draw, because there is a draw condition. And basically, a draw is when you fail to achieve all the mission objectives. Now, missions require generally for you to take and hold control points, as well as potentially some other things as well. Now, there's a bunch of things that are here, but I'm just going to start this battle as Newport News. Now, there are minor battles in a campaign, and then there's the major battles. The campaign is separated in campaign segments. So, right here, I'm at First Manassas, 1861, and I am going to fight the minor battle of Newport News. Now, early on in a campaign, the game will give you a bunch of free troops. So here, there's about 12,000 Union soldiers facing off against 4,000 Confederates, but then I add my brigades. We get to very close to even numbers. Now, when you start a battle, there's going to be a text like that. Now, over here, I do already start with a cavalry unit. Cavalry, the way cavalry plays in this game is that it's very... cavalry is very fragile, but it's quite capable of doing a lot of damage. Now, you also have general units. You have skirmisher brigades as well as skirmishers. You can also detach skirmishers from your line infantry, so to speak. Now, the Civil War is interesting because when it started, at the very start of it, there were still Napoleonic era tactics in a lot of ways, but then towards the end of it, you start getting into like almost World War I trench warfare, and you start seeing Gatling guns being used, as well as rifles that would end up being similar to what you faced in the First World War. Now, over here, my only objective is to actually hold the town. Like, if we look at battle objectives, my goal is to lose less than 50% of my army, and as well as to hold the objective. I get to draw if I inflict at least 15% more casualties on the enemy army. Now, battles, now each individual unit, I'm going to slow down the speed of battles. Each individual unit has morale, cover, and stamina. Stamina represents how tired units are. Cover represents how well they're protected. So units in heavy cover will take less damage than units in an open field, as that happened. And battles are fought in segments. So you don't have necessarily the entirety of the enemy army being deployed from the very start of the battle, nor your own army really being deployed from the very start. Instead, you get them potentially arriving seconds. Now, that's not the case for every battle. There are certainly some battles where, minor battles, generally speaking, where you might get units to, where you might get a lot of your army and the enemy army to deploy from the very start. But generally speaking, like, units will come in waves. So for instance here, the unit started with a good portion of their own army. Okay, and units can be captured. And units also need to be supplied. So for instance over there, the Union actually captured my supply train. Now, I've inflicted quite some staggering losses on the Union over there. Units also move faster via the road. Cavalry. Cavalry needs cavalry can't survive again in a full frontal fight, though. Of course, that's because they tend to be outnumbered. And we can see more units arriving of the enemy there. Now, the AI units, or rather the units that I get for free, don't really matter, so I'm not too concerned about losing them. In fact, losing them might be a good thing, because that way I can get their guns. You can get captured guns from enemy units, or from your own wounded troops. Now over here, my goal, I've gotten more supplies over here. My goal is to wipe out really a good portion of the enemy army. If not all of the enemy army. You can fight battles of annihilation. It isn't necessary, by the way, but you can do so with clever tactics. And it actually has an impact here. Like, that's one of the things that I really like. Like, actually fighting battles of annihilation isn't just like, oh, I'll just have to fight all the battles like that, as it would be in a Cold War game. No, here it's like, you don't need to do it. But if you do it, especially as the Confederates who, well, as the game progresses, the Confederates in their campaign will end up significantly outclassed by the raw numbers of the Union, but by their greater quality of the guns that the Union is able to put forward. Okay, and we've won. Only lost 2,000 men. I captured a decent amount, killed almost 5,000, got a bunch of guns, cavalry. It wasn't the best possible outcome, by the way, but I did inflict some staggering losses. Now, over here, I'm going to go get 1 point in army organization, and that's going to unlock a new division for my army. Now over here, there's a bunch of statistics. If there's one downside to this game, is that UI scaling is not great on higher resolution monitors. But you have different statistics. Now over here, I'm going to focus on the range power, and I am going to get a few more things.
Yes, sir.
Now when building, like in the army camp, there's a couple of things to say over here from the battles map. You get various reports in correspondence about what you're going to be dealing with, how the enemy is reacting to what's happened. Now, you get reports, intelligence reports. Now, what these tell you is the size of the total enemy forces that are in a field. This is not the total size of enemy forces in an individual battle, but rather it's in the entire course of the theater of operation. So there's 40,000 total troops, of which 15,000 are going to be heading over here for Manassas Bull Run, for the first Battle of Bull Run. Then you've got the percentage of how many of those troops are veterans, as well as their equipment, represented by armory. The Union will have a higher armory score. The Confederates will have a higher veterancy score, which is pretty historically accurate, all things considered. Now, for you, customization troop-wise, you have to worry about money, and you have to worry about total number of men. So over here, I have 131,000 total cash and 12,000 troops, beyond the troops I already have in my divisions. Now, with units, you can either... you do have, especially the mod, you do have a veterans pool. Like, you do have a pool of veterans to select from. Now, over here, I am just going to get these units to at least 1,500 men, not necessarily higher. Then you've got political points. You also have an armory with different guns that you own or you can buy. Skirmisher guns, cavalry guns, artillery. All well and good. Now, over here, I can get the 2nd Division. And you've got political points. Political points are won or lost in battles. You can also spend them for various other benefits. Guns, generals, named generals. So for instance, here I can get James Archer. I'm going to get James Archer, who's almost a brigadier general. Each division, each army corps, like I've named it the 1st Army Group, but each army corps has a commanding general. Then you've got individual divisions in the army, and individual divisions have individual brigades. Each part of the army, from the corps to the division to the brigade, individual brigades, have a commanding general. So over here, I am working to assign commanders, individual commanders, to artillery batteries, to individual units. Generals provide... Let's see if I can get Napoleons. Generals provide stat bonuses. Basically, the way it works for divisions, the way it works here is that brigades can get different upgrades and higher statistics. A general helps increasing those statistics. So for instance, they get different abilities in battle. Now over here I am using my money to get a bunch, and I'm going to use a bunch of Springfields. It is going to be a bit costly to do it, and I might actually want to put a major in charge there and use one of the guys that I already have over there. Gonna cost me a lot of my money, but this is absolutely going to be worth it. Now there is a veteran pool added courtesy of the mod. Just going to increase that even further. Don't be afraid early on in some of the early battles of depleting your veteran pool. But one of the things I may want to do here is actually get the cavalry brigade. Although I am going to get some pretty early on as well for free as the Confederates. Or at least I will get one with Forrest. Nathan Bedford Forrest. Now, cavalry, especially melee cavalry like this, represented by the sword, is important because melee cavalry is going to allow you to chase down enemy units or flank enemy units. Flank enemy units, take down artillery, capture them. You need to capture their guns. Also, prisoners of war can be exchanged for some free troops. And minor battles can have an impact on the major battles. So for instance here, because I fought and won the Battle of Newport News, the size of the Union army overall in Bull Run has been reduced. And also there is a scaling aspect in the game. So because I brought a lot more troops, there's going to be a bunch more Union troops being brought forward. Now, I'll still get 14,000 troops for free, and I do intend to use those at Bull Run. Now, this particular battle, there was basically a standoff between the Confederates and the Union over here. The bridge is relatively unimportant, to be quite blunt about it. I am going to deploy 2 units over here. 2 units to hold the bridge. 1 unit at the barricade over there. Gonna leave my artillery here. But the other units, all the other units, including the cavalry, will move to hold positions in the north. Because historically speaking, that's what the Union did. And I am going to speed up the pace of the battle, and the goal is to hold those positions right there. So the Union is going to march a bunch of units over here. The cavalry is going to stay in reserve until a flanking opportunity is presented. So if you let them, now cavalry is a little far less effective at shooting down units. Their infantries. Actually, if you want cavalry to be effective, you need to dismount them. Now the main Union army is going to start heading over here. Now I could have challenged him. Yeah, I should have challenged him. Right, so that unit of cavalry has been wiped out. Right, we're gonna fall back over here. My 2 brigades, my 2 core brigades here are not going to be able to stop the entire Union advance. Nor do I want them to stop the entire Union advance, because that would be a very costly endeavor. So I'm just going to pull back over here, let my artillery do their thing. And fall back to these houses over on this side. As Union skirmishers prance about. I'm going to get reinforcements in enough. So battle's being done in stages. Okay, so the goal now is to withdraw to Henry Hill because the Union is marching quite a few troops. We have finally gotten some reinforcements. Now this unit has stood its ground fairly well so far, but I'm pulling them back. We got more reinforcements incoming, and we're gonna use them to flank the enemy. Or some of them to flank the enemy. And we got more supplies coming in as well. So the main unit army is on the field over here. Now they're still trying to cross. Oh, what is that? Wow, okay. Did not expect that to happen. Because I fought this battle before, right? And you don't expect the surprise flank attack there. Well, speaking about surprise flank attacks, I am going to do one of my own with my cavalry. To wipe out all of their artillery, mop them up. Now they're trying to withdraw. So those guys are utterly broken right there. Now units can be ordered to run, they can be ordered to charge. Same with cavalry. Alright, we now have reinforcements. Final batch. I don't even need them. The battle is effectively won. But there he is, General Johnston. Now, their ammunition is pretty low at this point. And as you can see, much of the Union army has already crumbled. It's collapsing. My units are pretty tired. The victory is within sight. Johnston's brigades. That last batch of reinforcements right there. Oh, they're gonna get wiped out there. One last stand on the hill. Send Stuart in. They're gonna break. If we capture those guys, we win. They're finished. That is the last Union force on the field that's still active. Here. Otherwise, I have captured quite a few of the Union troops. I do want to get their supplies, though. There's General McDowell. There's their supplies. Full frontal cavalry charge? Sure. Though my units have been pushed to the brink over here in terms of exhaustion, so that's why they're performing so poorly. But the last brigade, though, they almost lost half their men. And that would be it. I lost almost 6,000 men, mainly from the reinforcing armies, not from my own troops. So yeah, I wouldn't play a battle like this if all of the troops were mine, right? If it actually mattered. Now I got Thomas Jackson as a brigadier general, 3,000 prisoner for an additional 1,300 recruits. And we move on to the first Western campaign, the Battle of Shiloh. And I've gained myself 2 career points. Let's see what we get at Shiloh. So I'm up against over 40,000 troops. These guys did get pretty brutally savaged, I'm not gonna lie. Over there. Get some replenishments.
Yes, sir.
Cavalry performed pretty well. I can replace some of these guys. You want to get the melee replacement. And of course, you do have the Battle of Shiloh and 2 minor battles as well. I think one of the things you do want to do, right? So we get 12. One of the things you absolutely do want to do is get some army organization over here. So this will allow me to get another division. I'm gonna put Jackson in charge of the 2nd Division. I can also get Jeb Stuart as a general, or get 11 Napoleon guns. Now, Napoleon guns, artillery is actually quite critical over here in this game. Far more so than one might think. Because to really win these battles in an absolutely decisive fashion, you want artillery. So, Jubai Early, Ewell, Stuart, three pretty famous Confederate generals. I am going to get some Napoleon guns. That is going to cost me quite a bit politically. I'm going to get General Stuart. Eventually, I'll give Stuart command of a cavalry unit, but not at this moment.
Sir, yes, sir!
Now, you also have the supply wagon for each corps. Okay. Now, over here, I'm going to create more divisions. Now, I do have a limited number of guns. And I have more men than I have guns at the moment. Okay, let's get Early and Ewell. Get another artillery piece. Now, at this rate, I'm gonna run out of, like, I have a lot of men, but not so many guns for those men.
Sir, yes, sir!
Now, I can increase with more army organization. I can increase the number of units.
Yes, sir.
But that's not necessarily a priority here. Not at every cost.
Yes, sir.
Alright, so I've got currently 60 gun, 3 divisions, 15 brigades. And if I increase army organization even further, then that will give me another brigade, another division, which I can use over here at Shiloh in the next battle. And bring about even or even greater numbers against the Union. You need to... Though there have been some surprises in this so far, because the mod redoes every battle up until Fredericksburg. After that, things do stay the same. But anyway, there are some minor battles ahead, and then there's Shiloh, but I'm gonna stop it right here. It is a lot of fun. It is a great joy to play. There's a lot of intricacies, some things you may not necessarily be aware. Like there's some people have made entire artillery guides for this game, because there's quite a few different artillery pieces. It's not like just, oh, pick the gun that you have the most of, right? I mean, obviously you're going to do that to an extent or another. You can't avoid that, but there's intricacies to go with that. There's also the fact that each of these officers that you do have can be wiped out, and you can suffer some significant consequences as a result of that. Cavalry in particular is very good, but you don't want to have a lot of units, and cavalry, however, is very expensive at the same time. Very expensive, hard to replace. Artillery is also pretty good. Great deal of intricacies, great game, lots of things to like. It's still a game that has a small but fairly active community of people. Now, one of the things I'm going to do is get rid... Well, I'm gonna keep the muskets, but I'm not too fond. We do have skirmisher weapons. We do have some artillery. I can make another division work with that. The one problem I'm gonna have here actually is officers. I only have 1 lieutenant colonel. I can use some majors, I suppose, instead of just using full blown colonels over here. We have some downsides with regards to that approach. It is worth going full on in, I think, early on in a campaign, because it is going to pay off. But one of the things to say is you want to capture as many enemy units as possible, or annihilate them, because that way you capture the guns. And if you're playing the Confederates, they're gonna have much better guns than you will, the Union that is, because you have whatever guns can be smuggled, like you got French guns, Austrian guns, etc. And what you can capture, what can be smuggled. So the Union does have a significant firepower advantage over the Confederates, and that is reflected in the game. I would say that the Union is a lot easier to play, because if you're not completely incompetent, it is pretty easy to just smash the Confederates, take them out, capture a lot of their men, and eventually your manpower advantage is going to be felt. Whereas if you're playing the Confederates, you can win overwhelming victories, but the Union will just keep throwing more and more and more men against you. Anyway, Costin here signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, enable notifications, and I'll see you boys and girls next time.